can't remember what came first, if it was Initial D, if I started watching Initial D, or if I started playing Forza first. And by no means am I an Initial D nerd, so I don't even think I finished the series, but the dude who had, the lonely dude who had the Silvia, you know, the two-tone, when I first saw that, I was like, oh, like that's a sick-ass car. I didn't know much about cars, so I didn't even know that we couldn't get those in the States. But I saw it in Forza 4, so I'd always use it for drifting. And I used to look it up on Craigslist way before you could even get like a Silvia. And I didn't know that, I didn't know they were illegal. And I would always look them up and be like, oh man, like none for sale today. And I was also like I was probably like 16 and I had no job and no money. So there was no way I was ever gonna buy one. But every now and then like one would pop up and it'd be like in Canada or something. So that was like my first introduction, I think, to like an S chassis. And it happened to be a Silvia. And then, you know, some years go by and I get my hatch, which didn't work out too well because it was like a pretty battered, it wasn't like a battered car, but mechanically it wasn't like good, and I didn't know how to work on cars. Like it needed a transmission as soon as I bought it, and the transmission blew as soon as I sold it. That I always had that heavy imprint of like, oh, I'm gonna have one day a Silvia, and I wanted it to be two-tone, which I got pretty close with a two-tone coupe, single cam coupe that I had for a while. But so I feel like that laid the foundation, and then, yeah, just my friend Aldo got a Silvia, and he didn't want it. And so it kind of like fell into my lap. And I was like, oh, how could I not grab this Silvia that's right here? And I'd been driving for like maybe 3 hard years at that point, like drifting. But I would say once I got the Silvia, it was like, this car is made to drift. Like the chassis, it was turbo, it was like the fastest car I ever had, even though it was all stock. So I think that's when, I don't know, it just all the stuff just aligned perfectly. Like got a turbo, I like drifted a turbo car for my first time, maybe like a month before that. Bo let me drive his Laurel in a parking lot. And that was like a whole different sensation of like, I have boost, I have actual power, versus driving a Miata, which is like, you just clutch kick like 30 times. Aldo got his, he didn't want it. I ended up buying it, and now it's been painted 10 million times, it's been crashed 10 million times.
Hey, hello. Let me turn this music down for me, actually, a little bit. This is way too loud. Here we go. All right. What's up? This is the first time I have actually tried to stream in a super long time, considering the last time I streamed was like video game stuff a long time ago. So I'm gonna just edit some photos. I probably would have been editing anyways. If you guys like what you're seeing, stick around and we'll go from there. Let's see if Lightroom is open. Okay, I think you guys should see Lightroom now. Let me actually check. Okay, yep. I'm just gonna start editing. I'll show you the library that I'm editing with right now. It's like a curated selection images basically that I've just used for this particular stream. It's just a few, 19 to be specific. I don't think I'm going to get through all 19, but these are just various motorsports related images and things that I've dealt with in the past, and I kind of want to just go through them. What's up, Mike or Jay? Sorry, immediately telling everybody your government name. But we're gonna go through, starting with these ones, just because it's literally ordered by alphabetical order, so these just happen to be ones in Japan. This was from 2020, from early 2020, I think January 2020. This is Nico's circuit. I'm just gonna go down, edit them as I would now. A lot of these images you might have seen before if you've been kind of following for a really long time. But some of these images you may have never seen, and I may have never released some of them as well. But yeah, we're gonna go from there. So let's actually just start editing these. Let me know if you guys can or can't see various things. Like I said, first time streaming, don't actually know what you guys are looking at, what you can or can't see. So I do need to kind of potentially fix things as time goes on. But yeah. So red is like already specifically a very difficult color to edit for cars because they reflect, but on top of that, just for like the internet, the world of the internet doesn't really see red very well. So it's already kind of a weird one. I find myself tending to try to kind of push it a little bit orange if I can. But this car I think is like so specifically red. Like the original photo here is just, it's such a vibrant red. I don't want to do too much and then take away from the vehicle. I'm going to be editing these ones in a bit of a more like kind of stylized look, so to speak. So we'll see what it actually ends up being. I didn't realize when I took this photo that I completely blew all the highlights out. Like, this is bad. There's like orange chromatic aberration and stuff along the highlights too. So I'm gonna have to ideally not do that in the future. Like, even if I bring my highlights and my exposure all the way down, you can start to see that there is a sky up there. It's a little bit of cloud, a little bit of blue, but essentially nothing. Not ideal. Alright. Yeah, and if I bring the whites down, all it really does is turn gray. That is something that'll happen with like really blown out highlights. If you bring the whites down, it doesn't bring your highlights down, it doesn't fix them. It just turns the whites gray. So this is one of those areas where I will push the reds to be a bit more orange. And I like to do this in the calibration tool because it will affect them in a different way than it does like in the HSL and the color grading. And it does it in a, I guess the easiest way for me to explain it is in a more like algorithmic way. So instead of taking what it decides a color is and then creating and then changing it and like adapting it to a new color, it instead changes what its understanding of that color is in the first place. So all the adaptations, all the changes, all the things you make to that color are made with a different understanding of what that color is. And it just results to me in kind of like a more thorough and more like, I don't know, useful way of potentially editing a color in a way that you wanted to, and it gets you some various things that you couldn't get before, like you couldn't get with just the HSL tool or just curves or like the color grading tool. So personally, I really like how it works. Already we're looking at a much nicer image, I think. What was this? Okay, f2.8 ISO 200. I think this was my A9s. This is like a 24 megapixel photo. Surprisingly sharp. I usually don't, or at least I haven't been messing too much with the tone curve like previously, but I have started doing it more as time passes, and what I've found is I find myself messing almost exclusively with the blue tone curve. I just suck at messing with the other two, and that could be a personal thing. That could be just that those colors don't exist in real life as much, so you don't really see them as much, but like I just am so bad at messing with those curves, and I'll show you kind of what I mean in a second here. But yeah, I'm just not, I don't know. Trying to see the difference here between kind of changing the shadows warmer versus having the shadows colder. I think there's something to be said about both, but I'm not 100% sure what I want to do here. Okay, let's mess with like lower shadows, I think, and make them a little colder, and then highlights a little warmer for the time being. I have a cat that's like about to take this camera down. What's happening, Gleanie? Linguini is my cat's name, if you were wondering. Okay, I'm gonna show you what it looks like when I mess with the green tone curve. Again, just not, I don't know, I just don't know how to do this very well. It just seems like every time I mess with the green tone curve, it's gonna result in something bad. Like, I don't know why I would want purple shadows, and I don't know why I would want green shadows, but it never really works out. What's up, Derek? Oh, now my cat is playing music. One sec, you guys might hear music in a second. No, stop. Okay. He has a perfect habit of stepping on top of, what is that called, a HomePod? HomePod that I don't really use. I should probably get rid of that thing. I guess the red tone curve is a little bit better in that like dark, like cyan in your shadows is kind of a well-known thing that people do, so at least it makes a little bit of sense. But I don't know, I think I like just messing with the blue one the most. And then this like region tone curve is just nice in general to mess with. It's a little bit simplified, being able to go through those things instead of having to physically drag and drop on the curve makes things a little bit simpler when you're just messing with the luminance and like the full overall light without specific colors. What's up, 7L Bray? Thanks, man. So let's actually, I do want to darken the shadows a bit, but if you see over here on the wheel, I don't really want this dark. Like, it's a little too dark, I think. And then I think the shadows are probably fine on the grill area. I think these are probably fine, even though these shadows are probably technically clipped. Oh, I guess they're not, actually. That's surprising. Oh, wow. I guess nothing is technically clipped in this whole thing. How do you sub? Dude, if only I knew how to use YouTube. There should be a sub button somewhere, I think. It should be, like, directly under the video, I think. Yeah, so I'm going to take the shadows down. like I was doing, but then I'm gonna mask out the car and mask out the wheel specifically a little bit later to bring those shadows back up. Because I want the definition of that wheel to remain. Excuse me. Our girls hang out. I don't know if you remember me. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. 100 clarity always. That comes at the end. Alex Martinez came for the creamy keyboard. Sorry, man. All I can give you is Thok today. I'm not even sure if you can actually hear the keyboard. I guess I probably should have tested that in my many test streams I did before this. Right now I'm messing with the hue. So if you're not a photographer, I should say, HSL color mixer means hue, saturation, luminance. Hue adjusts the colors, so it will make red change in its various tints. And then, if you're on red and then orange, and it goes down. Saturation changes the saturation of those colors. So kind of like the density of the colors, but not quite. If you're probably know it's not quite the same thing, but it'll just literally make them more vibrant, more saturated. Luminance will make them brighter and darker. It adds luminance to the specific colors. So this is another, if you were here earlier, you saw that I like to make my reds a little bit oranger. So this is one of those areas that I'll do that in the HSL, as well as the calibration tool up on the top. I just feel like it's just a little more pleasant, and it also just really helps for like viewing of the color red. Like, it can't be too saturated, it can't be too red, because for whatever reason social media just doesn't pick it up quite right. Okay, the chat's actually, there's too much. I'm very confused. Swallow the mic. I can't. My mouth is too small. I didn't test that. I promise. The ASMR vids. This is an ASMR vid, isn't it? Isn't that what this is? Ungrateful host. That's me. I really should get I'm doing this on my phone. This is my chat. I need to get a proper actual screen so I can see what's coming in. Still running on the single screen. Okay. In this case, orange brings down the saturation in the red a little bit because it's not like a pure exact, hexadecimal equivalent red. You can actually see what the saturation is affected on Alt. Or I think on Mac, I think if you hold down Option. I'm on a Mac, but I don't use Apple keybinds, so I Command and Option and stuff. I don't remember which things are which. So I'm pretty sure it's Option on a Mac, but Alt on Windows. It'll show you what you're affecting. So in this case, I can take the red down a little bit on this, but it's gonna affect the orange on this, I guess technically orange car over there. So I don't want to take it down too much because I don't want to lose all the saturation in that vehicle. Second monitor, if you want to buy, good price, good sale. All right, hit me up offline. Yellow, I want it to be a bit subdued, but you can see the background that adds a little bit of color to the actual photo. If you take that down too much, it just looks weird. I don't know, I don't like that. But if you do the opposite, it becomes extremely unrealistic as well. So it's actually a pretty solid place where it is right now, but I am gonna up it just a tiny bit in the saturation just to make it feel a little more alive there. And then green, I think I'm probably gonna go down a bit. Yeah, down a little. I know that windscreens do look like this in real life. I understand that the windscreen you look out of, the windows you look out of are not completely black or completely without color, and they usually have a little bit of a blue tint to them to kind of counteract the light of the sun, but I hate how it looks in photos. I always think it's resultant of oversaturated colors when editing, even though that's realistically probably not the case, but who knows. It's not cream and incredibly aesthetic, so probably doesn't want it. I mean, that's true. If I had I need to I gotta invest fully in the stream right now. One stream, I gotta spend $2,000, but I need another camera to like come up here and point directly down so you guys can just see my fingies typing away and see the desk setup. It's the only way. I also want a cat camera. I don't have any cats in here right now, but oh, speak of the devil, one's coming in. But I gotta get like a little camera that just hangs out staring at my children. What's up, Alex and Tia? How's it going? Thanks for coming. Okay, let's get some actual editing done. Gonna a little darker. I think so. I increased the luminance on the reds, but I'm gonna actually decrease a little bit on the oranges to force out the red color of the car a little bit more. Decrease on the yellows too, to make that background stay in the background so your eyes don't get drawn to it. And then kind of the same thing on the greens. This dude is gonna throw. There's a cat right under the camera right now. Come on, buddy. And he's getting on my printer. Nice. Where I make all my money. Really, I make almost nothing with that thing. Okay. Doing the same with the blues. A lot of the time you'll notice that blue audio, dude, all right, he's touching the camera. Okay, give me a sec, guys. Give me just a second here. Ugh. All right. Genuinely trying to control the camera. Let's see if you guys want to see. This is Linguini. He likes to stand on me and doesn't like to be picked up otherwise. Gomi's not in here. I don't know where he is, but we'll see. All right. I think I'm looking at Lightroom, right? Yeah, okay. Keyboard check, thok it up. You guys won't be able, here, I can take it off and show it to you. You won't be able to hear it in the mic, I don't think. Here is the keyboard that I'm currently using. Here's the back of it, which is a mirror. I can, here, look, I'm still editing. And just see the screen. I could edit from here. I don't think I can get real typing audio. This is gonna annoy the shit out of people that are just like, what are you doing? This is an editing stream. Okay, I'll try to type into the microphone. Okay, I'm pretty sure that there was nothing. I don't know if anything came up. Who knows? I gotta find where the plug is. What's excessive? Are you insinuating that having a mirror on the bottom of a keyboard is excessive? Let me see my enemies. Right. Okay. Purple and magenta are a really weird one in photos. Mostly because you rarely see the color, but I'm going to show you where adjusting the luminance of purple and magenta can like destroy your photo if you don't do it right. So for whatever reason, the side of the car that has a little bit of highlights on it from the sun is purple, according to Lightroom. There's cat hair in my mouth. And so if I push it down too much, it will start to cause like artifacting in the highlights of the image. And you can see that here, and it gets really ugly really quick. And I suggest not doing it, but you never know. 5 people watching and 3 out of 5 are asking for a keyboard check. Oh, fair. See, I can't see the number, so I didn't know that I had 5 whole people watching. Not gonna lie, that's maybe better than I did on any of my video game streams back in the day. Okay, color grading. Color grading is a newer thing on Lightroom if the last time you used Lightroom was 4 to 5 years ago. And I feel like it's not used particularly often by a lot of people still for some reason. Maybe I'm totally wrong, maybe it's used by everybody, but it just like seems like it's not, because you rarely see, like you can do insane things, right? You rarely see, I was gonna say you rarely see edits that look like this in Lightroom, but I don't know, you do kind of see this on Instagram sometimes. But I feel like you rarely see people utilizing this properly. And in my opinion, at least, the way to do it properly is to just be like very, very subtle with it. So right now I'm looking in kind of the teals and the blues for my shadows to see if I like that. I am gonna move up to the oranges and the greens. The way I see it is like teals and blues kind of look kind of modern, kind of Sony-y. But if you go up into the oranges and the yellows and stuff, you can kind of get a nostalgic feel to your photos. And a lot of the times I'll pair like an oranger shadow with added grain, because that really makes it feel a lot more like, I don't know, just like a film photo. There's a lot more things you can do to make a photo look like film, but if you're just doing it strictly within Lightroom and you're doing it quick and dirty, this is a kind of an easy way to do it. I know not all film looks like that. There's a lot of film that has really, you know, really blue, really purpley, really teal shadows, but in just, I don't know, in my mind, all film is Kodak gold apparently. All right. This is like a fairly typical edit for me. Bluer shadows, warmer midtones, and then I sparingly touch highlights. Highlights is an interesting one normally. So like if you're doing video, normally you would want to not mess with your midtones too much. You don't really want like people, or you don't want, the reason you don't do it is for skin tone, but you don't necessarily want the midtones of an image being like drastically altered, because it can start to look really unnatural. But what you do mess with highlights and shadows, and in photography, at least with Lightroom, I've noticed that highlights can like severely mess up an image if you change them too much. But I guess so can everything else. So let's see, that's our starting image. That's where we were. This is where we are right now. I still have some masking to do, but I don't think that's too bad. So let's do a little bit of mask. I have some of my like custom masks that I've made. I'm going to bring in the dark ground mask to darken up that ground. And we're going to subtract the subject, which luckily Lightroom has decided is the car, so that's good. And then I'm gonna bring the mask down a little bit because I don't want it to be quite as dark, and then drop the amount a little. So that mask did that. I think it just calls a little more attention to the car, which is nice. And then I'm gonna do an object mask. I'm gonna change the mode to this rectangle select mode. Mostly because the drawing mode is just difficult. You gotta draw around the entire thing and it's kind of a pain in the ass. So if you do this rectangle select one, you just kind of select the outer edges of the area and it will select your mask. The reason I didn't choose subject is that subject oftentimes, when there's more than one like potential subject in an image, it will kind of just select too many things and it's just annoying. This one did select a little too much. It has a little bit of the chaser in the background. I don't want that. So I'm gonna take the brush in the subtract tool on the mask. In this case, I have auto mask on so I don't mess up on the car, and I'm just going to auto mask the chaser out. But you also have to think about this in the way of like real life, of a real image, right? So you don't necessarily want to auto mask the chaser out if parts of that chaser exist behind the vehicle you're masking. And so in this case, since part of that chaser is behind the window, if I were messing with colors here, I probably wouldn't want to mask that portion of the chaser out because those colors would be affected by the windows. But if I'm messing with exposure or contrast, or I guess just like a light, if I'm messing with light, then you probably would mask out the things that are going through the window because the stuff behind the car would not necessarily be super affected by that. In this case, I am going to mess with light a little bit, but we're going to see how much I'm going to mess with it. So I'm going to not do it yet, and I'll mask it out more later if I have to. Jay, dude, imagine what I could do if I cared enough to edit my photos. Yeah, stuff you could do. I will admit, your photos are really nice. I think there is something to be said about just having an eye for the actual composition of the photo. It's one thing to be able to edit really well. It's an entirely other, and in my opinion, much more important thing to be able to compose well. And I think you're actually kind of seeing right here something that isn't particularly, the composition is not particularly special in any way. I mean, this photo was taken 5 years ago. I don't know how much I was necessarily studying composition that much at that point, but it was a photo of a cool car. I'd probably never seen an S15 before at this point. So this was like, whoa, I gotta, snap a bajillion shots of this. When I was going through these images earlier today, I was looking at all the various, versions of the images that I took and trying to find the best one to utilize for this stream today. And I think I took like 12 of this photo pretty much. And I can just like see my, my 25-year-old version of myself just being like so worried that it wouldn't be perfect. So I had to get a bajillion shots, but it worked out. I got at least one. So you can tell I lightened up the car the smallest amount, like really nothing too big. I don't want to really call attention to the fact that it's much brighter. We're going to take that wheel, like I said before, it grabbed a bit of the tire. We'll take that out later and just lighten the shadow of that wheel. You can lighten the highlights too. I will a little bit. I find if you lighten them too much, it'll start to look a little bit unrealistic. One thing I do when I do lighten the shadows though is I'll increase the contrast too, because it will bring down the like ultra shadows, like the blacks basically. I know that you can literally do that right here, but it does it in a natural way that I just like how it looks. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to cut that tire out with the brush tool again. In this case, the auto mask is still on because I don't want to potentially mask out the wheel too much. We'll just go in, get that tire masked out. And then once I finally get this somewhat clean, it's probably clean enough. I know this doesn't, like if you were trying to perfectly mask something out, this really is not that clean. But I've noticed that in this type of mask where you're not like fully cutting an item out from a background, or there's a very clear definition of where the edge of an item is, if the mask isn't perfect, it sometimes can actually add to the natural look of it. And that leads me into this next thing. So as you can see, the object mask for the car is this whole thing. What I like to do here is subtract brush tool again. This time we're going to turn the auto mask off by pressing A and bring the density down to about 75%. And we're going to increase the size of the masking brush a lot. And then I'll turn the overlay on so you can see what I'm doing. But basically I'm just going to kind of cut it down around the edges. And that is going to result in having the mask affect the edges, in our case, about 25% less than the rest of the image. And that will help with blending the vehicle in, blending the masked out object into the background again, so things look a little more realistic. It's just a kind of a personal preference. I've always hated the halo effect that can happen when you mask something. So turning that off, I think just looks nice. Anyways, this is a all Lightroom edit of one image here. So this is the beginning and that's the end for now. I think I could do some stuff with the windshield. I could do some stuff with the headlights, but in the interest of time, we're going to move on to the next one. This is funnily enough, S14 from the same area. I really liked the lighting in Nico. We got here really early in the morning and the lighting was so beautiful. I'm head from the Japan ones to move into some other ones. I have some Ferrari things and then some drifting. Looks like we have Evergreen at night at a DriftCon. Whatever this racetrack is called. Down in Medford, Oregon, and then some Formula Drift stuff. Oh, and some Formula Mazda stuff at the Ridge. Literally one of those images. This was just kind of a fun one that I was messing with. But yeah, the lighting in the Japan stuff was insane. Like, honestly, the lighting, like this image, completely just unedited image, you could probably just send this thing out. Like the lighting is just so nice. But yeah, okay. Anyways, let's skip ahead. Let's do this one. This is at Watkins Glen. You might have noticed I didn't crop the other image at all. I just didn't feel that it really needed it. This one though, almost instantly, like there's never a situation where I would release this image without having the fence line straight. So we're gonna do just that, straighten that fence line. And then I actually don't like the car that far off. So the guidelines I have on right now are the golden ratio lines. This is a golden spiral, and then as I switch through, you can see the different ones, but this is the rule of thirds line. I would probably utilize the rule of thirds on this one a little more than the golden ratio, just because I think it would make the car a little too close. But if we smack the middle of that car pretty much right on the line, I think that is just like a visually appealing place to start. And then we go from there. So first I'm going to start here with my profile. I think I'm going to go with Chrome probably. These profiles, these are things that if you have Lightroom, you probably will not have. These are something that I created basing them off of a different profile company that I forget the name of. And basically it takes your camera type and it changes the colors based on math. It was my attempt to make things look like Fujifilm. I really like Fuji's color and their like film emulation, and so it was kind of me trying to get that. Jay, it's not in focus, correct? It is not. This photo is like very much not in focus, but I think this one was the one that was the closest in focus that I got of this shot. I mean, these cars are moving pretty quick. This is a crazy estimation, but I think this car at this point in the track, since this was kind of like a really slow sweeping right turn, probably anywhere between like 95 to 125. I'm not 100% sure. Don't quote me on that one. And this is shot at 1/25 on my 70 to 200, all the way back at 70. So getting that in focus is gonna be a tough one for sure. With the colors again, I don't know why I went with red almost immediately again, but we're gonna mess with these colors too. I do think in this scenario, I'm actually gonna increase the saturation of the reds, which is rare for me. And then we'll mess with the green primaries a little here and the blue primaries. This is a really easy place to do the kind of teal and orange look. So boom, teal and orange. Make your reds orange, make your blues teal. I feel like that's not a way people normally do it. So just if you're into that look, or if you're in like Eastern Washington, California area, or just like beach area and you want that typical teal and orange look, that's going to be a really easy way to do it. But I am not going to do that this time. I'm going to push the blues to be a little teal, but I can almost bet I'm going to go back on that later, but we'll go from here. I like to do auto white balance to see where it gets me and then kind of move around from there. In this case, the auto white balance, like that's, in my opinion, that just ruined the image. So immediately I'm leaving the auto white balance, going back to as shot. And then changing it from here. I'm gonna brighten it up a teeny bit, and then I think I moved the temp to be ever so slightly more green, but not too much done here. I'm gonna change the contrast a fair bit, and I'm gonna bring the exposure up to start, but I'm gonna bring some other things down that might end up kind of doing the opposite of what I just did with the exposure, but we will see. This track is interesting. A lot of the, like international tracks and stuff have these. In fact, I think all of them do. But this is like the big, I guess, wall, but it's wires, of course, or, like metal and they protect the cars from, well, they protect the people from the cars hitting them if they fall off the track. But they look really interesting in this view because this is also where they hang signs, and you can see the sign kind of starting to come into view here. Believe it or not, that is just a normal sign with text on it. But it is hard to tell. So in this one, in the case, I didn't see Linguini get back there. Since the photo is so out of focus, I'm changing the texture and really increasing it a fair bit. And we'll take Derek's suggestion here and put clarity up to 100. I'm just kidding, I'm not doing that. I'm gonna put clarity down a little and dehaze just a tiny bit. Vibrance, no, I don't know. The point of vibrance is to make the image more saturated in a way that respects color tones. If you look at saturation, you turn that up to 100 and it's, it looks overbaked. It looks like it's been cooking in the oven for way too long and you forgot to take it out. But if vibrance, it will kind of respect the color, or the original intent of those colors a little bit. I find that if you are just reasonable and you only mess with these in like very minimal degrees, the saturation is generally the one to use, in my opinion. Vibrance creates a harsher tone quicker, or a harsher difference quicker, and it's just not my style. So we're gonna do that, and then we're gonna look at sharpening. In order to get this view, when I sharpen, this is my masking view, so I'm only sharpening edges of photos. You hold down Alt while you're doing this masking tool. That's generally a thing for Lightroom, by the way. If you hold down Alt, or I believe Option on Mac, you will get the secondary versions of things. In this case, sharpening will give you the black and white, so you can have a little bit of a better idea of what you're sharpening. Like I said before, masking will show you the outline of what you're sharpening. So I'm gonna mask a little less than I normally would. I don't really want to sharpen the road, like the roadway, but I do want to sharpen the car. I normally wouldn't sharpen this much, but the car really is so out of focus that I want to sharpen enough that looks nice. I am going to do AI noise or AI denoising as well, but I want to do that after I'm done with editing the photo, because Lightroom does this weird thing where if you do the AI denoising, so not the manual denoising with the luminance, but the AI denoising, it creates a new DNG, and creating a new DNG is wonderful because it carries the edits over and everything's fine and dandy, but it makes that your last spot, like that's your original now, and so it's just a little bit annoying. So instead, I try to make sure I do it last, so I have both images at the same starting point. Okay, we will go to the tone curve. I'm going to mess with my highlights and my shadows here again with the orange and the blue. Actually, this is making me... Okay, I am going to swap things up a little bit. One of the reasons that I'm doing this is because the image is... But since the image is out of focus, and like I said before, making the shadows orange here, I'm going to have to get Linguini in a sec here probably, if he doesn't ruin my window. Making the shadows orange kind of makes me think of film. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the shadows orange a little bit, but I'm also going to edit this with film in mind. So I'm going to go to the nostalgia colors and sharpen a little bit less. Then my white balance is going to change here too. I'm basically going to edit this one in a way that kind of makes me feel like I shot it on film. Even though I absolutely did not get this on film. Although that would be incredible. Excuse me. Alright, let's mess with the highlights. So film, one thing that's interesting about film is that it has like Linguini's going to the camera again. It has far more dynamic range than your general digital camera. In fact, digital cameras have been chasing the dynamic range of film forever. That's why we have these like 16-bit medium format cameras that have, insane amounts of dynamic range, your Hasselblads, your GFXs. All right, bud. You gonna, okay. He's behind the camera right now. Being a pass, what's up? Okay, whoops, sorry. So because of that extra dynamic range, on a computer screen, it can look like it has a lot less contrast. Now, in reality, that contrast is actually just seen in a different way. It's I guess calculated differently, if you can even call it a calculation in the like analog film world. But it will look different on the screens that we see. So one of the ways that if before I had my contrast much higher, I'd bring it down a little bit to kind of make it feel a little more reminiscent of film. The colors, hues, stuff, that is stuff you can kind of choose on your own. That's going to be independent of film. There's no film color. All film has different colors. So I'm just going to kind of mess with something that makes sense in my mind, something that I feel like maybe if I was shooting some sort of film stock, it could have feasibly looked like this. I do like the red being a tad more saturated, which I normally wouldn't do if I was thinking film. The green's up a little too, which is again kind of weird for me, but hey, why not? I've already delivered these photos, now it's just time to have fun. These are from 2022. I believe this is 2022 Watkins Glen. Ferrari, I believe it's called Clienti Corsa, I want to say. And what that basically means is these people own these cars that they're driving. They usually have 1 to 3 of them, and they drive them in kind of their own like private, I guess you could say, race, but it's not a professional tier by any means. But they were largely cool people. I enjoyed working with them. All right. I think I might be getting a little overboard here on the film look. I'm not so sure this looks like film as much as it just looks weird at this point, but I'm just gonna kind of keep messing around with it and seeing what I get. I'll note that a lot of film I see, the highlights will be not white. Like they're definitely slightly less natural highlight colors. I don't really know the reason for that necessarily. I don't know if there is a particular reason for that, or if that's just a choice of the film stock. I know it's definitely something you see in film, or I should say in movies. We don't actually really like super clinical highlights. If you know it or you don't, it doesn't look right to us. So our highlights tend to be different colors. So here's when I'm going into the effects and changing the grain. Sometimes I would do this in a different application. I use a plugin for DaVinci Resolve when I'm editing photos, and that plugin is called Dehancer. I've used it less and less as Resolve has gotten better and better and introduced things called a film looks creator or film creator look, I don't know. But it's very useful in creating very realistic looking grain, and you can also add some halation and some glow, which would come with film in its natural state. Halation also has an effect on film if you take out something called the remjet, and that will add this like really crazy halation. So if you're seeing images, it becomes somewhat fancy, somewhat focused on Instagram and on social media, where you'll see an image that's trying to look like film and it's got a ton of halation, and halation being the kind of red hue, the red glow on the very edges of things, on contrasty points, usually highlights. You'll see that a lot on Instagram. Usually that is either someone was shooting with film and they took the remjet off, or they are shooting digital and using something like Dehancer or a different plugin and really, really, really pumping up that halation slider to the point that's usually actually somewhat unrealistic, but you know, people do it. I am increasing the size and the roughness of the grain. Oh, that's way too much. I want to be able to see something. I was not shooting on ISO 800 that day. All right, I think it's kind of nice. A little bit of a nice amount of grain. I think that if someone were to have shot that back in the day, that might be something they'd print, put on their wall. I don't know. This is what that image looked like originally. When you go back in Lightroom, you can't see the original crop, unfortunately. So I can go all the way down the history if you want, and there's the original. That was weird. There's the original crop and everything. That to that. So I don't know. I think it looks pretty nice. Definitely looks a little filmic. It's different. We'll see. Let's go to Massimo. That's actually, no, not the driver of this one. The driver of a different one though. Or was it? Oh, maybe it was the driver of that one. Because I think this is him later. Unfortunately, actually just sliding. This is Indianapolis. He slid because, I mean, you can tell it's very rainy here. If you couldn't tell, there's all the rain. And he just lost control right down the straightaway, right past, like went past the checkered flag perpendicular to the raceway. It was kind of interesting. But let's move to a human one. This is Frederick Osbo looking at me straight in the camera. This dude knows how to do this. So a lot of the times when I'm taking photos of people in motorsports world, this is like the image you want, right? This is the image of the person staring directly at the camera, showing their emotion, showing their determination, showing what you want to see a competing racer feeling. But a lot of the time you get people showing you their actual emotions, which is completely acceptable, but those actual emotions a lot of the time are happiness, and they're just really hyped and they're happy to be there. And people that aren't necessarily professional, in his case, models, but also professional motorsports people or professional athletes, they don't necessarily know the like correct way to take a photo, and so they'll do a very typical and very acceptable and very normal thing, which is smile or like give a peace sign like this or something, because that's just what they would do if you were taking a photo of them anyways. And so a lot of the times, unfortunately, when photographers are looking for this vibe, the vibe of determination, the vibe of competition, they instead get this vibe of like happiness and everything like that, which is, again, great. And it's completely acceptable, but it doesn't make for a photo that people feel impact from. And so it doesn't usually go anywhere. Derek, this is one of my favorite shots of all time. Thank you. Thank you so much. Blue magma in a helmet, Dr. Sus. Yeah, this dude is wild. So one of the things that I was really upset about this shot was this. The text and the imagery on his banner was just blown completely out. And if I remember correctly, dropping the highlights, it helps. It doesn't 100% fix it, but it's not quite right. So that annoyed the crap out of me. We're a little bit to get rid of some of that right now. I'm going to move to a center crop so I can really perfectly center him. And you can use the angle here. This is the horizon tool. Normally you would use this, along like a horizon line, but I'm going to use it along his eyeballs to make his eyeballs the horizon line, and then we'll center the image along his beautiful furrowed brow there. So that's like a perfectly centered image of him. If only his steering wheel was perfectly centered too. But let's start messing with it from here. I think, yeah, I like chrome here. You want to be careful with messing with your calibration settings when there's a human. That can really affect their skin color, and that starts to kind of mess with things a little too much, in my opinion. So you got to be really careful there. You can go back and mask him back to normal if you want. That just is like unnecessary work that you caused for yourself for absolutely no reason. So I tend not to do it. I just instead will be a little more careful with how much I'm changing in the calibration tool. I think that was fine. We're going to try, oh my God. This is why I think auto white balance doesn't work all the time. I don't know how it got to this. This is actually crazy. This might be the worst I've ever seen it. What if I were to just say that this is why it's too bright, right? Yeah. Okay, what about this? Yeah, at least that's reasonable. I don't know what it was doing with the other one. That's insane. We're gonna pretty closely to this. I do want it to be clear that you're looking through a windscreen, which does mean there's going to be a little bit of green and a little bit of blue. Sorry, I thought there was a cat down there. But then this is like, oh man, upping the contrast on this is so... Upping the contrast just changes the difference between the highlights and the shadows so much that in this case, it essentially acts as a dehaze without darkening the image. So that's what dehaze does. And then this is what contrast would do. It cuts through the glass, so to speak, and it is extremely helpful to really get some feeling out of these images. I think images, when you see humans and they're super happy or they're not expressing happiness, a little bit of contrast or a lot of contrast potentially can really help push that emotion across. We're going to bring the highlights down. Like I said before, I am going to brighten his face up a bit, but I want those highlights down for the top here. It's just not my style. Bring shadows up a tiny bit. I don't want to completely counteract what I just did with the contrast. Bring whites down a little bit as well. Actually going to bring blacks down a little bit as well. We're just going to make this a relatively dark image to start. Exposure up just a tiny bit, just to bring some of that brightness back without affecting the highlights too much. Texture is another thing you're going to see will help really nice for images like this. So you can, I got his face just kind of so you can see what that does, but it, in my opinion, at least, it adds, I'm not going to do a texture 100, but it adds something to his face. It makes it feel as though he's been through something. It makes it feel as though he's a little more war-torn, so to speak, a little more... Sorry, Linguini's just meowing in the background. A little more kind of rough, and I really like that when you're trying to look like kind of badass like this. Clarity normally would kind of do the same thing. Clarity would have been the thing I would have used for that before, but now that texture exists, we're just using texture. And then I think I am going to go ahead and dehaze a tiny bit, not too much. We are going to brighten his face back up later. That should be good. I don't think saturation and vibrance will be too good here. Yeah. No. We'll do some of that just on his face later on. This is a really good example of showing where I really don't want to mask very much. I just want the sharpness to kind of hit the parts that matter. So in this case, you know, a little bit of his face, his eyes, a little bit of the edges of contrasty parts, great. But anything else, we don't need that detail. To kind of show you, I got to zoom way in to really showcase this, I think, but I don't know if you can see it on stream. It actually looks like it got, like his face softened overall, but it added sharpness to edges. So because of that, I'm actually gonna cut it back a little bit. I don't want his face just like softening too much. There we go. It's a bit better, and we'll bring the sharpness back a little bit as well. So now he is just a little bit sharper there. And then on the tone curves, gonna mess with these same ones again. I think in the original edit of this photo, I went pretty blue here. I don't know why, but lately I've just really been into the warmer shadows. In this case, it kind of brings out the green of the windscreen. I kind of like that. Speaking of green, we'll see if a little bit of green in the shadows. No, I don't really like the green. A little bit of normal adjustment. I don't want the white in his helmet being too bright. We will bring up the lights a little, with those highlights down, we have a little bit of leeway on the lights. It's fairly helpful. Derek, because warm tone's better than everything. I agree, at least now I do. I don't know why I changed. And then we're gonna bring the shadows down a little bit as well. Just a teeny bit. Dark's actually up ever so slightly. Okay, color mixer. So this is something I'm going to use the like color picker tool for the saturation, and just show it on his eye, because I want to saturate those eyes a bit, but I don't want to. Yeah, unfortunately, it's just going to saturate too much around him, so I'm going to do that in a masked out area instead. So this is going to be targeting the entire image, so mess with the hues a bit. Don't want to mess with them too much. I'm getting so annoyed with this stuff up here. Same reason I hated it in the original one. His the yellow is affecting a lot here, and that is affecting a lot of his helmet as well as the steering wheel. If you guys are aware of Ozmo's car, his color and everything, what comes through on this image is actually a little bit off of what it originally was. So to kind of get that back to where it used to be, I'm going to turn the yellow to be a little more orange. And fortunately, it's not really affecting his face too much. In fact, it's not affecting it at all, except for a tiny bit, excuse me, on his little bit above his eyebrow. That's actually his helmet. But yeah, we'll bring the yellows in, make them a little more orange. I just think that feels a little more true to life for his color. And I'm also going to saturate them while we're at it here. Greens, it's going to change some. I'm making a little yellow. Aqua's actually going to make that a little more blue to kind of get rid of a little bit of the green hue in the car. Same with the blues. Purple and magenta, are those messing with us? They are in the skin tones a little bit. Can see above his right eye, if you're looking at it, his left side. That's a bit annoying. I want them to look like the rest of his face. That looks nice. And then same thing on the magentas. Just a little bit. Okay, I'm so crouched over. Let me... Oh. I think after like 30 years, I learned how to sit. Okay. Red saturation down just because I don't like that red. And then orange. I'm just going up a tiny bit because of his face. Well, leave it at -1. Technically didn't go up. Darkening orange, darkening red in the luminance. You don't actually want to go too far there because it will start to cause artifacting. You can see the yellow up here, a line where it causes that really ugly artifact there. That'll happen when something is like extremely highlighted or extremely shadowed. And so if you mess with colors around those extremely highlighted or extremely shadowed areas, it can start to look really ugly really quick. So I don't want to do that. I'm going to keep it right there. You can start to see it in the greens too. So here's where it's really shadowed, messing with the greens, and you can see as I make it lighter, you get a really ugly white highlight around the yellow. The greens are probably safe where they are. Blues will go slightly lower. And then purples, since that's his face, we're actually just going to kind of try to keep it equal. Make his face look somewhat flat in this original part before I do a little bit of masking. Okay, to the color grading. This is a technique that I don't think I technically showed you guys yet, or I might have done it without really realizing, but I like to go overboard on the color grade originally, so I can see where the colors are affecting and what it's doing. And so I'll do that initially, and then pull it way back after I get to where I want it to be. I wonder if you guys can hear him in the background there. He's meowing like crazy. So I'm gonna go here, and then, like I said, cut it way back. And if I remember correctly on the original one, in the midtones I went really heavy in the like orangish yellow. I'm gonna take a step back on that. I don't want to go quite as heavily into that anymore. I do still want there to be a little bit of like, you know, it's not quite realistic. It's a little off. I like that. And then with highlights, we're gonna do somewhat of a similar option to the midtones here. Mostly yellow, orange, little bit of green, and then bring it back down. Just so it looks nice there. Okay, I think in general that's pretty good. Now is when we go to the mask. Let's see if the subject mask gets him. It does not, so I'm not going to use that. But I will use the object mask. Again, we're going to be on that rectangular selection tool and just select his face. It's pretty good about it. This one is going to be a little difficult. In fact, I think that might have just been kind of perfect. I'm going to cut out just a tiny bit along the top here, along the edge, because that is a little bit more than where his actual face is, but not too much. It's not too crazy. So I think we'll probably stick around there. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. This one's going to be interesting because I'm going to brighten him up. So we're going to have to mess with feathering the mask a little bit by doing that low density subtraction brush later, because that's going to be, it's going to, like, essentially if I do this, like, that's clear, right? Like, that's edited, doesn't look so good. So I just want to make sure that we can make that look nice. We're going to bring the highlights up a bit while not doing too much of the shadows, and in order to feather that a little bit, bringing the blacks down up a bit. You can already see we're going to have to feather the left side of the image a little on his face, keeping the contrast high so it looks good. Okay, we've brightened up the face a bit, but I think we've also lost a little bit of the color in doing so. So I am going to use this point color, which is a new tool, a new thing that you can actually do in Lightroom in masks, which is extremely helpful because you used to not really be able to affect specific color when you were in a mask, and it was such a pain in the ass. So we're going to use the point color, select his face, and we're going to just make it a little warmer. Just a little bit warmer and a little bit more saturated. Just a tiny bit. Just a tiny bit. And I think that will bring that original color back while keeping him a little brighter. That's pretty nice. It's not quite right. I think his face has gotten slightly magenta tinted in bringing the brightness up. One thing that you have to kind of, I guess, keep in mind when you're adjusting the masks with their luminance, all the adjustments that you've made to the highlights and the shadows and the midtones, those adjustments happen on that mask. So if you've made highlights purple and then you make the mask brighter, you're adding more highlights to that mask and you're making it more purple. You have to adjust for that. You have to account for that. So that is luckily possible since they have the white balance setting in the mask that is independent from the rest. So you can kind of bring that color back down or back into, I guess, spec, so to speak. I am actually going to use the saturation tool, which I don't like to use too much, but I think at least it's going to work out. I think that looks pretty solid. He's brighter. He's solid. I think that looks pretty good. I do want to make sure that this is not just hair in this corner here. Oops. It looks like it maybe is. I don't know. That's really hard to tell. So what I'm going to do is when I'm brushing this out and adding a little bit of feathering, density up, brush high, auto mask turned off, or I should say density down. Brush out the corners just to make it feel a little more natural. I'm actually going to make this brush even bigger just to make that feel a little nicer. Same thing on this side, but just a little bit on this side since that's where the sun was coming from anyways. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. The brush, as you can see, really helped to make it blend in. and his face is still a bit brighter than it was before. We are going to do one more thing. I don't always do this. I like to do this on animals a fair bit more than I do it on humans, actually, because I think on animals it's kind of a, I don't know, it's kind of like a select look that you see where like someone will mask the eyes out and make them look a little better, or specifically the iris and the retina out. But I am going to do it on his because his eyes are particularly striking in this image. So I'm going to just raise the exposure on him a bit, add some contrast, darken the blacks. Actually bring the exposure down a tiny bit there. I just want those eyes to really pop. I want, when you look into those eyes, for you to just, you know, be a little bit mesmerized by them. This one is difficult to do right, I think. I think it's so easy to make minor changes to the eyes while you're editing it, and then not really realize that those minor changes you've made are way too much. And so just toy with it, you know, mess around with it. In this case, I'm going to cut down in the middle here. I don't want this to be as bright. The reason I'm doing it, oops. The reason I'm doing it with low density, though, is because I don't want it to be fully cut out. Because that would make him look like he has weird vampire eyes. I don't think that's too bad. All right, we're going to add the other object, the other eye. Now, in this case, since his other eye is in like pure darkness, this might actually be too much, or potentially it's actually looking like maybe not enough. Yeah, it's not really enough. So I'm going to cut that object out. We're not going to use that one. I'm going to use a different mask for that eye, and we're going to kind of change that one accordingly. Okay, starting with that cutout. This one we're going to raise some things a little more, but then we still want to add contrast. We still want to cut down on the blacks, because if we don't, it just won't look very realistic. I mean, the eye is still in the shadows, right? It can't be perfectly bright. It can be slightly brighter. I think that's pretty good. This one's a little harder. Like I said, it can't be perfect, or it can't be like really, really bright on this one. So I think we're going to kind of leave it there. I'm going to go through and cut out some of this because this is not actually his eye and it should not be brighter. And the same thing down here on the bottom eyelid. And I'm going to go through and kind of mess with that on the other side too. Got a little bit of the lash in the bottom lid lit need to be, so we'll darken that up. All right. Take those off so you can see them. I think that's pretty solid. I think it probably could be done a little better. I think if I had... Yeah, I think it could be done a little better, but I think that's pretty nice looking. One thing, I do like to kind of zoom out sometimes to get an idea of what it looks like when it's not just giant in my face. I can focus on the whole image a little better. But I think that's pretty good. Okay, we're gonna do one more. I'm gonna do this one here. I like this one because it's kind of an in-view, in-car photo of drifting, which not very normal. You don't normally see that. Already, we're gonna go with the crop because this is clearly just needs to be cropped. It's quite clear. There's some of the car that I was in the image here, and the cars are completely off center or off really any plane that I would want to be focused on. Now in this regard, it's kind of weird. Normally, like if this was the horizon line, you know, you want to make the horizon line straight, except for the fact that in this case, the left of the image is further away from the right. So straightening that horizon line actually isn't straight. And that's not something that I can like mathematically fix. I'm sure there is someone out there that can just lickety split figure it all out, but I can't. So instead I kind of do it by feel. and I think that's fair. You could also do the horizon line on the car, have it be a little more like that, but that makes this whole thing a little weird. And drifting is kind of an interesting sport where the back of the car, when you're making horizon lines or when you're making Dutch angles, normally you would have the front of the car lower down. Drifting is a weird one where the back of the car lower down makes sense in a brain, right? Because usually the lower down portion of the vehicle in the image is the portion that is driving the vehicle, the portion that's steering the vehicle, the portion that is making all the decisions, right? In drifting, everything that is making the decision, everything that is steering the vehicle, all of the inputs that are having effects on the vehicle are happening on the rear end. The rear is what's important. The rear is what's driving the vehicle. And I don't mean in a physical way of them being a rear wheel drive, but I mean in a, I guess, way of photography, or in like an emotional way almost, where the rear is what you are to focus on as opposed to the front, which is what it is in every other sort of motorsport. And so oftentimes you'll find if you look at drifting images over the years, the rears will be lower, which is weird. Look at drifting images and then go look at F1, go look at Indy, go look at rally when they're not in a drift, you know, go look at all these other sports and the front is down. Look at drifting, the rear might be down. It's an interesting, weird paradigm, but I like it and I focused on it over the years. So sometimes making it the opposite of what you would normally think might be the way to go. So I think that's what I'm going to do a little bit here. Have this is Julio's car, by the way. This is Goon Squad, a little bit lower down, and that's where we'll start with the crop. Put those lens corrections on. Lens corrections, if you guys didn't know, just make simple distortion and chromatic aberration corrections that are based on the lens. So this will not fix the chromatic aberration in the image. It will put predefined chromatic aberration correction from the camera, from Lightroom in this case, but it's given from Sony to the image. And then same thing with profile corrections or lens distortion corrections. It's based on a profile. You can turn them off and you'll get, in this case, slightly zoomed out middle and zoomed in edges and some vignetting. That's not bad. There's no reason that you have to turn these on or turn them off. They're completely up. I click them on almost all the time. In fact, when I'm shooting with my current camera, I have a default setting that has them clicked on, but I will mess around with them later on. You can also turn a vignette down or up if you so choose. One of the reasons I like to use the vignette from the lens correction tab as opposed to the vignette from the effects tab down here is this vignette is fake, right? This is added on to the image after, whereas the vignette from the lens correction tab is the original vignette of the lens. So this is a real vignette that the lens really had. And I think personally that looks nicer, more natural, more realistic, probably because it is the real one. And you can of course change the distortion as well if you'd like. I'm going to leave the distortion there. I'm going to have a little bit of the vignetting there as well. For calibration, we're going to actually skip down to basic first and select a profile. I do like chrome profile here. I like nostalgia though too. I did nostalgia originally when I was editing these photos. I might actually stick with just kind of the normal Adobe colors here. This is the original Sony color, the camera standard. It's the original Adobe color. I'm gonna stick with the original Adobe colors here. And then we're gonna mess with the reds. Funnily enough, his car is remarkably more orange in person. It does not come through well in photos. I've never really understood why. Whatever color that car is, at least Sony, not sure about others, but Sony sensors and Sony cameras don't see it as the color that it is, and they probably never will. All right, we'll start there. Hey, look, auto color actually didn't do so bad. I'm gonna test something here. I'm gonna go here and we'll do auto from here. No, okay, yeah, that's fine. It just was really weird on the other one. Okay, auto color did make us a lot warmer, but it wasn't super bad here. I'm gonna bring it down a little. I like that. Oops. Bring that back down. That's nice. I think one thing when you're editing photos and you're making really minute changes along the sliders in Lightroom, I struggle with this all the time, but it's really useful to not look at the numbers affiliated with those sliders. It can make you, or if you're anything like me, it can want to kind of be at a perfect number. So if I'm at negative something, but I'd rather be at -5 instead of -3, like maybe it'll kind of push me to do that. And it's a bad idea. You want to just, feel it, see what it feels like, see how it looks, and just go from there. So one of the ways that I get around doing that is instead of dragging on the actual thing here, you use the slider here. For whatever reason, in my brain, it's just easier to look directly at the image while I'm using that. And then, you just come to what you want. I don't know why, but it's just how it works for me. You'll notice that I never did that throughout this entire editing session though. So obviously I still need to kind of force myself to do that more often. So I like this one with the shadows a bit lower, the highlights a bit lower, but I might bring in some highlights in the top left corner later on to kind of mimic the sun. I'm gonna bring the whites down just a little bit too. If I remember correctly, this was during a DriftCon practice day. Is why there is like people in the stands were pretty much just drivers, and a couple like friends and family. Oops, too much dehaze. I personally like to bring clarity down. A lot of people like to bring clarity up. To me, down is the way to go. Just not really a big clarity guy. A little bit of dehaze there, and then a tiny bit of saturation maybe. All right, adding detail. So again, we're sharpening just the edges here. Don't need this whole image to be sharper. This is a sharp camera. Way too much sharpness. I think that looks pretty nice already. Tone curve. I didn't originally mess with the tone curve when I was originally editing this photo a long time ago, so it's going to be fun to kind of mess with the tone curve here in a way that I didn't do before. Although I am kind of, if I were to make this warm like this again, I would just be essentially recreating the original image. So for that reason, I'm going to go slightly in the other direction, but not necessarily for any other reason. Highlights all the way down. Boy, does that look horrible. Okay, let's do highlights up a tad bit, I think. That looks pretty nice. Brightness up just a tiny teensy bit as well. Darks up a teensy bit, and then I think we're going to do shadows down a little bit. Yep, just a tiny bit. Then color mixer. This is where you can turn his orange into the orange it really is by messing with the red here and the orange a little bit. I'm not going to try to make it particularly true to life. I'm just going to make it look nice, in my opinion. But this would be where you would want to struggling with a car's color like a bunch and you just couldn't make it look how you wanted it to look. You would mess with the color's hue there, or the car's hue, I should say. I do like to make my evergreen walls a little bit teal. Evergreen is a particularly boring track, and I think that adding some splash of surrealism to the colors and just kind of fix it just a little bit. Kind of make it look like how you want it to look. Or how I want it to look, at least. How I wish it looked when I was there. Instead of what is unfortunately mostly just a gray. Just a gray, I think is the best way of explaining it. It is the definition of gray, he says as he deletes all the blue that exists in the track. I don't think that purple and magenta are really affecting me too much. Oh, a little bit in the bottom there, so I guess I don't want to fully get rid of those. What did purple do? Kind of the same thing. I'll leave them there. A little bit there. This is kind of an interesting one. dropping the luminance of the orange makes it so you can see the goon livery better, but it, I don't know, it looks off, so I don't want to do it too much. Kind of the same with the red luminance. I'm going to drop the yellow a little bit. That wheel is really taking a lot of the vision for me. It's so much focus is going directly to that big yellowy green wheel. A bit too much. Bring the blue down just a tad bit. I think that looks pretty nice. And then the magenta, actually, I'm going to bring down a little just to bring the color in line. Now, the reason that color is a bit brighter is because of the exhaust, so it makes sense that it would be brighter, but personally, I want it to not be, so. Okay, we'll go to the color grading, and then I am going to show you one more thing about Lightroom here that I did on the original one that really made this image kind of look better. And the reason it made the image look better is because it made it actually look impossible with today's lenses. I was shooting this at 1/60th of a second at f8. What I did was I messed with the lens blur that made it look like I was shooting it at like f1.4. And whereas, yeah, I could have had a 35mm lens shooting at f1.4 with, you know, a crazy ND filter on there because it was really bright outside. It would have been very difficult to, you know, snag a good focus shot, and it would have been effectively impossible for the entire vehicle to be in focus because the focal plane would have been far too thin. And so what I did was I messed with the lens blur to essentially make it so the car was full focus, but everything directly behind the car was so out of focus that it would have been reminiscent of something like an f1.4, potentially even an f1.2 shot. I think that made a lot of people kind of enjoy it. And a lot of people's eyes kind of glued to this one. People liked this shot a lot. And I think it was because of that surrealism, that like knowledge in your brain that this is not right? Like something about this photo is wrong. Something about this photo is different. Something about this photo doesn't quite work in the way that I understand photos. And I know that not everybody is a photographer, whatever, but everybody understands what photos are supposed to look like. And when something doesn't feel that way, it evokes some sort of emotion. And things that evoke emotion tend to be focused on. Whether that means liked a little more in social media because the algorithm saw you staring at the photo for 10 more seconds, or if that means, you know, sell incredible pieces of art for millions and millions of dollars of years after you died. Something that evokes emotion is and always will be more important in the world of art than something that fails to. And I think one of the ways you can do that, especially in photography, is making something that is just a little bit off-putting. Not enough to make people look away, but enough to make people focus for just a little bit longer. I just got another cat up here, so we'll see what that one does. So, away from my tangent about emotions in photography, this is what the lens blur does. So if we look at the focal range, the things that are white are in focus, and then everything else is outside of focus. So as you can tell, it doesn't really work exactly how it would in real life, but it gives you an idea of what you're, you know, visualizing and what's in focus for you. So I am going to make it so the car is pretty good in focus, and I'm going to lower this focal range a lot to what makes not a lot of technical sense, right? Like, it doesn't really make sense that this much of the car would be in focus and nothing else. I know there's some mess ups here. We can fix that later. And so what it does is it adds this extremely weird lens blur, right? A lens blur that is effectively not possible. And that lens blur makes it feel interesting. It makes it feel kind of cool. And I think that's extremely kind of helpful here. One of the things you would do in this tool, oh my gosh, cat just freaked out. One of the things you would do in this tool after you're messing with it to really perfect things is to go into the brush refinement, change your focus points. So here I'm brushing in focus, which I know is kind of weird, but it just makes it a little more realistic. And then we'll brush in some blur as well. This car shouldn't technically be in focus. So we're gonna brush down. This is John's car. And then just kind of brush some blur along the top there. Brush some blur along John's car over here. Okay, this could be done significantly more, and you could really, really perfect it. It's kind of a weird thing to do in my opinion. I don't do it on everything, but I do kind of like it. We're gonna recrop just to center the car, and then that's where we started. That's where we ended for now. This is an interesting one. I could definitely go many different ways on this edit. This is kind of more of a filmic, interesting vibe that is not particularly clinical or anything, but I just like when it came to this image. It just, for some reason, it felt good. Anyways, you guys enjoyed. I hope you had a good time on this stream. I am going to head out, I believe. This was really fun. I'm going to continue doing this. I'm going to try to do it on new images and new kind of sets that I'm editing along the way. So I am doing some DriftCon stuff next week. Tomorrow I have a wedding. I won't be editing those photos. I'm secondarying that, so you won't see that, but I will have some stuff coming up, I think, on the week after that. Hopefully you guys will like it. It's going to be all drifting, and you will see a much more realistic version of my actual process, from culling images to editing the images to delivering. You're not going to see the delivery portion of it, but you will be able to see my, how I would go about doing all that stuff. Those images are also going to be edited in a real way that I would be editing event images. So quicker, dirtier, easier. However, I'm shooting the event in a different way that I wouldn't be normally shooting it. So you will see some more involved edits that you wouldn't normally see if I was just trying to belt out 250 photos. Anyways, I really hope you guys enjoyed. I will see you guys on the next stream. And yeah, all right. Have a good one.